welcome back to another video. I am in a different location, as you might be able to tell. There are stuff going on in my life, so I can't use the same room, but I will be going back there eventually. I also am still on my laptop, which means the camera quality is not the greatest, and the lighting is most likely going to switch up. I know that a lot of it is me moving around, so I'm going to try not to move my face in particular. I'm just expressive. I don't know how much I'll be able to suppress the urge to move. So today's video is about the differences between the book and the movie of Tuck Everlasting. As we all know, movie adaptations typically don't stay true to the book, and I think that's for multiple reasons. Movies can just do things that books can't, and books can do things that movies can't. Specifically, books can get into characters' heads, and they spend a lot of time on the thoughts of the characters, whereas in movies, unless you're doing narration from the character, you can't get that third person omniscient where you're listening to the inner thoughts of one of the characters. So they have to come up with different ways to do that in movies. And a lot of that is by adding stuff to kind of give you an idea more of who they are so that you can understand what they're thinking without them having to explicitly say it. Another reason is just that movies have the ability to visually show you things. So sometimes what's in my head differs a lot from what's in the head of the filmmaker, and they make it into what's in their head and not my head. So that change would be in the different interpretations of books, because that's the other thing. Things can be interpreted differently by different people, which is what makes media so fun in general, but it's still frustrating whenever you're stuck on this one specific thing being, and then it's not in the movie. And also, sometimes the filmmakers just don't care too much about the book. They say, I like the story, and I'm going to take the story, but I'm not going to keep every detail, which I think is wrong. I think if you want to make a story that's similar, say that it's based off of this thing, but don't call it this thing. We're seeing frequent stuff like that happening in today's world with the Disney live-action remakes. They're changing so many things that just don't really make sense to change. And it's kind of frustrating whenever you go to see Snow White and she doesn't even marry a prince. That's literally kind of what she wanted throughout the whole thing. Her I Want song, her I'm wishing, is I'm wishing for the one I love not to escape the palace. And yet that doesn't happen in the live action movie. Why? Because the filmmakers didn't really like the source material, and so they decided to change it. There's also some instances where there are some things in the original source material that people find problematic, so they change that, and that does happen here. But without further ado, let's just get on to the differences. So right off the bat, the movie is doing something different than the book. However, it's not a big deal because a lot of movies do it. In the movie, we're starting at the end. Now, the reason that a lot of filmmakers do this is because they want you to stick around until the end, and they want you to be curious about, who is this person? I thought this was set in the past, but he's on a motorcycle. You just get really curious about how this person ended up in this situation, so you want to hear the rest of the story to figure that out. It's kind of like Ratatouille. You know, at the beginning it's Remy running through the kitchen with a block of cheese, and then it freeze frames, and he says, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I get here. And then he goes on to tell the story of how I got there, which is the entire movie. Movies do this a lot. That's not the issue. I have two main issues. One is that they totally could have gone the route of the book. A lot of times when they do this, it's because they don't really have a choice. And originally I was like, okay, I don't think they did have a choice, until I heard that they were doing narration. If you're doing narration, you have way more options to stay true to the book. And unfortunately, they didn't use the narration for anything good. I actually really didn't like the narration because it was used very sparingly, which, yes, you want to do that in a movie. You don't want it to consist throughout the entire thing, because then people are going to be like, why are you talking directly to us? A huge thing about movies is show, don't tell. You want audiences to be able to see what's happening and understand something without you having to explicitly say it to them. And narration does explicitly say, to the audience, hey, this is what's going on and this is what I'm thinking and whatnot. So I can understand why they didn't use the narration for this, but I think it would be perfect to have the narration say, 3 things happened at once. May Tuck left her cottage, and then you show May Tuck leaving the cottage. Winnie Foster decided to run away, and you show her staring at the toad as you've already established that she's unhappy in her life. And then the man in the yellow suit ends up in the Foster's woods, and you show the man in the yellow suit. I think this is the perfect opportunity to stay true to the book, and they just didn't.
Watching it back, I realized they did have some semblance of the narration covering what was happening, but it wasn't like the book at all, because it wasn't saying 3 things happened at the same time that seemed to have no connection, but they do. Instead, it was like mysterious things were happening, and then it's May was going to town, and then like long space. Because it was so spaced out, it didn't seem like they were connected pieces of narration. It seemed like it was just talking about what was happening, which we could obviously see anyway. So the narration still seems pointless, but I gave them less credit than they deserve because they did try a little bit.
However, I understand why they did this, because they wanted to grab attention. It did not grab my attention. It's not super interesting anyway. So I don't really understand why they would start with that to grab and keep our attention, because to me, it, 1, set it off balance, 2, was unnecessary, and 3, didn't do its job. They wanted to focus more on the characters, which I understand, but I disagree with their decision. But they had Jessie come back instead of May and Tuck, and this one I completely understand why they did it. It's one of the main things that I disagree with. Instead of making this story about what if you could live forever, they make it about the love story between Winnie and Jessie. Which brings me to the point of what they changed that from problematic to okay. Winnie is no longer 10 years old, and with a 17-year-old pursuing her, she is now 15 years old, which is a whole lot better. But I do think Winnie being less naive and being 15 years old kind of takes away some of the point of the story. A lot of what authors do in their books is they want the people reading it to heavily identify with the main character. So whenever it comes to early reading levels and like middle grade reading and stuff like that, you're always going to find the main characters as people the age of the target audience. So if the goal for this book is to have 4th graders who are 9, 10 years old read this book, you're going to make the character 10, 11 years old, the same age as the people that would be reading the book. And to be fair, the movie does do that. Because they're focusing on the romance element of it, an older audience is what they would want. Because 10-year-olds are not going to watch a movie and be like, kiss, 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 kiss. 15-year-olds are. Jesse came back because he is now the one that Winnie has the most connection with because of the choices they made in this movie. Whereas the reason that May and Tuck were the ones that came back in the book is because they are the ones that Winnie had the most connection with. This is why I heavily disagree with the romance of it, because Winnie, she had a little crush. She thought Jesse was very pretty, and he's older, so he's cool, but she doesn't actually, like, date him, you know? They don't hang out that much. The entire book spans about 3 or 4 days. The movie takes a whole lot longer because it focuses on, specifically, moments between Winnie and Jesse. When they're going swimming, when they're dancing around a fire, they're running through fields. Those things don't happen in the book. In the book, I think the only interaction that Jesse and Winnie have by themselves is initially in the wood, and then when Jesse comes to see her to say, we have a plan to get May out, and we're leaving, goodbye. They also have a very brief moment at night, that first night that Winnie is staying with the Tucks in their cottage, when he comes down and says, hey, in 7 years, drink from the spring and marry me, which is out of nowhere, because at that point, they haven't had any, like, direct interactions with each other other than at the spring, where they both were kind of, like, joking with each other, but that was about it.
Hello, editing me here. I realized I forgot to say that they also just kind of cut the whole Winnie going to bed and everybody coming to see her type thing. So when May put her to bed in the book, and kind of like set her up on the couch, not in a bed, because she was on the couch in the book, she had like this little heart to heart with her. And then Tuck came out and had a heart to heart with her. And then Jesse came. They didn't do that. This kind of goes along with what I was saying about they kind of cut the entire relationship between May and Winnie and made the relationship with Tuck and Winnie a lot smaller. Instead of having that connection with them, they just had the connection with Jesse that night, which is unfortunate.
She has much more of a connection with every other member of the Tuck family than Jessie. Jessie is just pretty. Which I think is why they did this. A lot of people do focus on the romance aspect of Jesse because that's kind of what his character is. But I don't think that was a huge point in the book, and I think they should have kept it to where Winnie is focused more on the family aspect of it, of having a good family and deciding whether or not to run away not only from her bad family to have eternal life and to live eternally with another family, or to continue the circle of life and eventually die. But basically, Jesse and Winnie have more of a connection in the movie than they do in the book, which is why he came back. And in the movie, they kind of disregard the relationship between Winnie and May completely, which would make it kind of strange for May to come back and be the one to discover that Winnie is gone. Because May and Tuck are the ones, they feel greatly that Winnie is like their child, and Winnie feels greatly that they are like her parents, because she doesn't, in the book, her parents are completely not present. And in the movie, her parents are there. It's instead of her grandmother, you have her parents, and you see her parents searching for her and being strict with her, but also saying, like, it's for your own good and whatnot. It's kind of just a lot of changes they made to get to this point in the characters. And that is my main issue with this movie, is that they changed the characters and the characters' relationships with each other a lot. But moving back to the plot differences, the Tucks meet in town before Winnie decides to run away. This does not happen. Does not happen in the slightest. There is nothing at all to indicate that this happened. In fact, the opposite happens. They meet in the wood. Why do they meet in the wood? Because they don't want to go to town. They don't want to appear in a group to people because people might recognize them. They actually, if I remember correctly, they avoid town completely. The only reason they go to town is whenever May or Tuck needs to go sell something so they can have money so they can buy something. There's a lot of issues with continuity of the fear and the caution that the Tucks take, because they say things like, I don't want anyone going to town right now because somebody's on our tail, which, by the way, that wasn't there either. But then they meet up in town, even though they know they shouldn't, because there's higher likelihood that people will recognize a group, like a family of 3 people that look the exact same, rather than just one person that might look the same. Whether or not they think it's like, oh, that person looks really good for their age, they look the same as the last time I saw them, or that person looks kind of familiar, or that person looks like somebody that I saw a long time ago, but that can't be right because he'd be old now. It's much harder to justify that random one-off thing if it's a group of people. This kind of sets, when I watched it, it set the entire movie off track, because once you get to that point, that's when everything starts to happen, and that's when Winnie starts to have this internal debate of whether or not she wants to live forever, or she wants to ride out the circle of life. And at this point in the movie, I'm like, okay, Winnie should be here. They should be having discussions, and Winnie should be a part of their life, because we only know the Tucks through Winnie's perspective. So every oddity that she finds makes it odd to us. Like when the Tucks don't eat at a table. Instead, they eat with their plates in their lap. They use their hands to tear to lick their fingers and to eat their food. And the only person using a table-like thing is Jesse, who is using his chair as a table. In the movie, they don't do that. I don't know why they don't do it in the movie, but they also don't talk while they eat, which is strange to Winnie. And I'll be honest, in my real life, I consistently don't eat at a table. I kneel at my coffee table and watch a movie, or I guess I don't eat with my plate. No, I do. I sit on the couch and I eat watching a movie. It depends on what I'm eating. But that's not completely strange, but it's strange to Winnie. And that's what matters here. And not talking during dinner. My family, dinner is the one time we do talk. Not the one time, but the majority of time we talk, because that's the time we can spend with each other without having other obligations. And so it's strange to Winnie to hear them not speak. But in the movie, they don't do that. So not only are we not seeing the Tuck family through Winnie's eyes, because we are seeing them through the filmmaker's eyes, but also they are not coming off as odd to us because we're not seeing it through Winnie's eyes, who finds this completely different than the life she has led so far. To briefly touch on the little differences of the characters of the Tucks that you see off the bat, there's a lot more that come up later down the road in terms of order of the movie, which is the order that I'm going in these differences. But just to touch on a couple is the character descriptions don't really fit the actors that they chose. I don't have a huge issue with this. I just wanted to point this out for sake of pointing it out, because I do find it, if it is written by the author, that means that is their intention and that is what needs to be in the story. And if you don't keep that, you're not keeping with the story properly. Also, just because I'm mentioning the differences between the book and the movie, I feel the need to mention this. May looks very different. May is actually pretty skinny here in the movie. She's not big by any means. And May in the book, there's multiple times when it implies that she's kind of fat. It says she's a great potato of a woman, which means that she is very round. She has a round figure. It also says that when she runs by the horse, she gets out of breath very quickly, and she turns red very quickly. And those are all traits of whenever you have a lot of excess weight on you. You tend to get hot faster, you tend to get out of breath faster if you're unhealthy in your weight, which is what the book implies. But in the movie, not at all. There's also the character description of Jesse. He is mostly the same, except that it does say he has curly hair, and in the movie he has straight hair. And it says that Miles looks a lot like Jesse, or Jesse looks a lot like Miles. They look nothing alike in the movie. Comparison between the two of them also says that Jesse has round cheeks, that he's kind of a little fuller, almost like he hasn't lost all of his baby fat yet, so he's got a little bit of roundness and a little bit of pudge here and there that Miles doesn't have, and that's like the main difference between the two of them, other than their personalities. I don't know that they really gave a physical description for Tuck or for Winnie, for that matter, so I can't really talk about them as characters. They didn't really have too many character descriptions, physical character descriptions in the book, but one of the biggest ones that bugged me, these were little ones that I just mentioned, but the man in the yellow suit is supposed to be really tall. It describes him as tall and narrow. He's the same height as Winnie in the movie, and that makes him so much less menacing. I mean, I genuinely do like that actor. He's a very good actor. He can do a whole lot, but they should have had someone taller, or at the very least given him heels or something, because if he's the same height as Winnie, how is he going to be able to control Winnie, which is kind of what he does towards the end, and we'll talk about that difference when we get there. There was also a whole lot of personality differences when it comes to the characters. The first difference that it specifically says is that Jesse travels the world. I don't hate this change. Although it does not happen in the book, I think it does fit Jesse's character a lot. Like I was saying in the previous video where I talked about the characters in the books, Jesse sees this as a gift. He sees it as more time to live life. And so it makes a lot of sense for him to be using this time to travel the world and go to see things and go to places that he may not have otherwise been able to do in his lifetime if he didn't have this eternal life, basically. So I like that change to Jesse's character. I really liked the actor for this. At first I was kind of like, man, he's annoying, but then I realized Jesse's annoying. Jesse is like grasping for attention from Winnie, and just you can tell that he likes her at the beginning of the movie before all the romance stuff happens. You can see him like just sitting there staring at her and getting super excited when she looks his way. And it's genuinely really cute to watch. I think they did a really good job with Jesse in the movie, but I think he's the only one that they kept the same personality-wise. The biggest difference between the characters in the movie and the book is Miles. Miles is completely different. In my short notes that I had here, I said that Miles is strong and mature all the way through. That is false in the movie. In the movie, they make him like an angsty teenager. Somebody going through a phase. Somebody who's trying to intentionally rebel against their parents because they're mad at the world. And it does not fit Miles' character in the slightest. They changed his backstory to justify why they made him so depressed, but in the movie, he's wearing like dark clothing to visibly show that he hates the world and he's angry and he's depressed. He comes in right off the bat, coming on hot. He's like yelling at everyone. He's very upset about just everything. And he says he wants to join the war. I don't know what war they're talking about, because they don't say. And they also have a picture of him in a uniform already, as if he's already been in the army or where whatever division of the military he was in. That's stupid. That is like the stupidest thing they could do as an immortal person that doesn't want to be found out. If you don't want to be found out, one, do not work for a government organization that's going to keep track of you for the rest of your life. The military is a part of the government. They have all of your records. They have your paycheck. They have literally everything about you. And if they realize that you are not aging and you are not changing and you're not getting hurt in the place where people come home with the most injuries and most people don't even come home at all, war is like the number one place to get killed and injured. And you are going to war knowing that you can't be either of those, and you're gonna try and hide it? That makes no sense at all. Why did they think this was a good decision? I think that they tried to put this on Miles to give him some life back, like to give him some sort of, he's a good guy because he wants to help fight for his country. But that is a stupid decision, and he could do that in a million other ways. Miles is just extremely uncautious, and he's immature. Instead of, in the book, he's like very, I had a kid, and I was a father, and it was very upsetting whenever we realized that we weren't aging, and my wife left me with the kids because they thought that we sold our souls to the devil, and I never saw them again, and I'm upset over that, but I don't want to be immortal anymore. I want to just be with my family, but that's how life is, so I just kind of have to keep going along and do what I can when I can and try and live some sort of semblance of life alone. Whereas in the movie, he's angry at everything that happened. He wanted his wife and kids to drink from the spring once they realized that the spring was what made them immortal. What happened in the book is they didn't even realize until they got back to the spring that it was the spring that did it. And by that point, his family had already left him, and they had basically been kicked out of the place they were living in, and they were trying to find a new place to live. And when they saw that tea in the tree still looking fresh at the exact same height, they realized that it was the spring that was what gave them this blessing, curse, whatever they want to call it. Not whenever they were still in town. And Miles, in the book, he never would have wanted his family to drink from the spring. He did not, like, he would want to stay with them forever, but he would not want to trap his children. I think I said in my original video, what he wants and what May and Tuck want most is to grow old together with their people and watch their family grow up with them. And that was stopped by the spring, and that's why they find it so unhappy, because to them, life is about family and growing old with your family and experiencing everything with the people. But whenever you stop living and getting older, you stop being able to do all of these things. Going back to the kids, the backstory they gave him is that his children both died young. Or no, one of his children, I think his daughter, died young. His wife was put in a mental asylum, and it's not said what happened to the boy, I don't think. That didn't happen. Because the entire village that they lived in said that they were of the devil and they sold their souls. So one person saying that would not end up in an asylum. The reason that the man in the yellow suit's grandmother knows her is because they were neighbors. I don't know if I made that up, like if that was just by assumption, but I'm pretty sure they were neighbors. It wasn't some sort of insane asylum group therapy thing where she's expressing all of her delusions. Miles is completely reckless in this. He intentionally goes, I think it's after Tuck says this, but it might have been before. Tuck says specifically, I don't want anybody going into town for any reason whatsoever. What does Miles immediately do? He goes to the bar and gambles and makes people mad because he steals their money. He wins. It ruins, like, that is not his character at all. And like I said at the beginning, Tuck and May, they're also a lot less important to Winnie, and they're a lot less important to the story in general. They're just kind of not really seen because everything is focused on Jessie and Winnie's relationship whenever they're with the Tucks, whenever she's with the Tucks, and Miles coming in and kind of ruining their happiness and their puppy love a little bit. I also briefly mentioned before that Winnie's parents are in this a lot more. They kind of take the place of her grandmother. The grandmother, they changed the beginning as well of Winnie. It's her grandfather just died, so it's kind of his funeral. Instead of doing that aspect, they did the grandmother is sick and dying throughout the film. That is such a small plot point. I mean, granted, it was such a small point in the book as well. Literally the only mention of the funeral is she thinks about the black, like, stuff on the door or whatever and remembers her grandpa's funeral. And that's literally the only mention of death in her life before. And I understand why they did it. They want the death aspect to be more impactful after she knows about the Tucks and immortality and kind of consider it then. But I don't think they show enough of it in order for that to be impactful like they want it to be. And I really don't understand either the kind of, whenever the mother gets into bed with the grandmother as she's dying, I don't understand the point of it. I think it just doesn't make any sense because we're not made to like this mother at all or the grandmother. So to see them have this connection means absolutely nothing to us. And it doesn't really look like it means anything to Winnie either because she stares at them and then we move on. Something I forgot to mention. Tuck speaks with a Scottish accent. Why is he Scottish? They are born in America. They live in America. There's absolutely no reason for Tuck to have a Scottish accent, and yet he does. I looked it up, and they said that the reason they did that is so that they sounded wiser. I don't know about you, but Scottish accents do not make me think wise. Any accent does not make me think wise. You can be wise and be from literally anywhere in the world. Why would you make him Scottish? And only him Scottish? I think at one point I heard May go into a slight Scottish accent on one word, But then the boys are completely not Scottish. Maybe it's because they're not supposed to be wise in this one, and Tuck is the one that brings a lot of the wisdom. But why would you make them Scottish? So with these character changes, some of the archetypes change. I have written down that Miles can be one of 3 things now. He can be the stock character, only personality trait is angst. He can be the complex character, where he now has a deeper backstory, so he's a little bit more complex. I think he's more of a stock character. He could also be a dynamic character, because in the end, he is helping Jesse and Winnie break May and Tuck out of jail. Another big difference. And he seems to almost be having fun, which is not like his character, but it's such a small part that I would still stick with Miles being the stock character. You also kind of switch the grandmother and the parents, so the parents are now the minor character and the grandmother are now the flat character, because she's like barely in it. She doesn't even speak, and the parents do speak, but they don't have like, they're not super important to the story. And then Angus and May become static characters. May still does hit and kill the man in the yellow suit, but it's like, it's much more justified, because we'll get there. But it's kind of like, it's just strange, because they're, as important as they are in the book, the only Tuck that is important in the movie is Jesse. And that brings me to the difference in Winnie. Winnie doesn't have too much of a personality difference, but I really didn't like the way that they portrayed her life, because I think it gives her different intentions and different motivations for doing things. For example, at the beginning of the movie, in the book, she feels trapped. She feels trapped because her parents are saying, you can't interact with people. You're not allowed outside of this fence. You're not allowed even to stay outside of the building for too long. You have to come inside the house. They are very, very, very strict. And the reason that she feels so trapped is she is not allowed to have a life of her own or talk to people. She has no way to interact with people other than her family. In the movie, she interacts with people a lot, actually. I like how they did it at first, where she's sitting in her house and she's playing piano while her mother watches. That I understand. It also, that shows a little bit of like the high society in them as well, because it does mention briefly that they are rich. So having this beautiful cottage and having her sit there and play piano and wear corsets, it makes a little bit more sense to have that in there because they are rich. But they include a maid. That's not a huge deal, but it's also unnecessary. And then they have her have a garden party where she is specifically interacting with multiple people. The entire point of the book is that she's not allowed to interact with people. People intentionally stay away from her and her family because they view them all as stuck up. And because Winnie is the Foster's child, she, by cross-contamination, what's the word? By her connection to her parents makes everybody think that she is also stuck up like them. So they don't want to interact with any of the Fosters. They call it a touch-me-not cottage because nobody wants to go there except for the people that live there. And now they're hosting garden parties? That doesn't make any sense. And then they also show them going into town, and the boys playing soccer are interacting with Winnie. And then she starts playing soccer, and they start to like her. No! That was a little loud, I'm sorry. That does not happen. That's not how it's supposed to be. Because Winnie is not supposed to interact with anybody, and everybody is supposed to think she is stuck up, and everybody is supposed to dislike her because of her family, and because of what her family makes her not do, which is interact with people. This doesn't take away the aspect of her being trapped. She is still trapped, but instead of being trapped in her own home and not allowed to leave, she is trapped in societal expectations pushed on her by her parents. And they changed the entire reason she ran away. She ran away because her parents were going to send her away to a finishing school, a boarding school where they teach you how to be a lady. And that would mean that her life is even more structured like it is in this boring high society life where you're playing croquet and playing piano all the time. I think the reason they did this is because they wanted to show, one, that Winnie is a lot older, and they also wanted to show that her family is rich, and that they think her family is stuck up without having to say, like, touch me not cottage. I think the same thing could have been done if they had, like, two random kids walking on the road kind of by the house and be like, I dare you go touch the door. Like, one of those kind of things where it's like, nobody wants to approach the house because everyone's afraid of the people that live there. I feel like the same point could have been gone across in multiple different ways, but this was the worst way because it changed the entire reason that she wanted to run away in the first place. They don't have the whole interaction with the music box. The man in the yellow suit, his motivations are also drastically changed because he is kind of insane. The reason that he originally in the book is going after the Tucks is because his grandmother knew, I think, Miles's wife. And so he grew up in tandem with, like, knowing Anna and knowing the son. I don't think they ever give him a name. Knowing the family of Miles after they left Miles. And the grandmother remembered the music box that May had. So he believed the story his grandmother told him based off of a real family he knew because they were neighbors and they were friends and he trusted them, and he also believes in, like, fairy tales and whatnot. Whereas in the movie, that means he would have to trust a person that is in an insane asylum. That their husband was a demon. I don't remember exactly what they said that she was in there for, like what she was thinking, but that's not right. Like, you have to be actually crazy to believe a crazy person. If they are in an, like, what's it called, an institution, an institute, where you are there specifically because your mind is not okay, and you believe their delusions, you are also delusional. So he is going this, like, even the very reason that the man in the yellow suit is looking for the Tucks is crazy. But then also they change it to where he already knows who and where they are. He has the picture of Miles in his military uniform. The man in the yellow suit shouldn't know their names. He shouldn't know they're called Tucks. He shouldn't know that that's their last name. And yet whenever he goes to Winnie's house, he asks, do you know the Tuck family? He shouldn't know that information. The reason that he knows that the Tucks are in Tree Gap and he doesn't move on is because he hears the music box when he's talking to Winnie outside of her house. But in the movie, he has been stalking Jesse and Miles coming back from wherever they are to Tree Gap. That's why he knows they're in Tree Gap. And he sees Miles at the bar that one day. It's just a lot of little things that add up to completely changing the man in the yellow suit and, like, how he got where he is. Instead of having the music box in the wood, they have him whistle the tune of the music box, which doesn't have any impact. A lot of what the music box had was a connection to how long the Fosters had been in Tree Gap. Instead of Winnie's great-grandfather being the one to establish the house in Tree Gap, it is now Winnie's father. So instead of her grandmother growing up and hearing the elves, as she thinks they are, as a child, and then hearing them only that once in her life, and then hearing them again when she's an old woman, that kind of shows how long it's been since the Tucks came together again. But now, that doesn't happen. It doesn't show how long they've been there, how, like, it takes away a little element of foreshadowing. And it's just like, I don't understand why they took that out. They could have at least had her mother hear it as a kid or something. I I don't like that they took out the music box. I think the music box does come up a while later, but I don't, at that point, it doesn't have any sort of connection to the story. And the man in the yellow suit is also just a creep in general. I think it was good. The actor did well in trying to make him menacing at the same time kind of charming. But what I don't really like is that he's kind of a stalker in this one. He saw Jesse and Winnie in the woods dancing around a fire. Why did he not approach then? He can take on 2 kids, especially when they're being reckless and dancing around a fire. Push one in. Like, I don't know, they probably didn't want to make it that kind of movie, but he had so many different options and different times where he could have approached the Tucks, and like, it is very easy at that point to manipulate Jesse because Jesse is 17 and he has the mind of probably someone a lot younger. So if he threatens to hurt Winnie, he can probably convince Jesse to tell him where the spring is. And the man in the yellow suit was there before Miles got there. So he totally could have done that, and they missed that opportunity. Instead, they had them just stand there and watch. Really weird. And they made the man in the yellow suit kind of a lot more lethal as well, because instead of just at the ending grabbing Winnie and trying to take her back to her family, he holds a gun to her head. And that's why May kills him. I'm going to get to the rest of the ending in a minute, but that just bugged me so much because the entire ending and the reasoning for everything happening the way that it did in the ending is just awful. But going all the way back to the beginning, the spring is not hidden. So the way that Winnie initially encounters Jesse is she is lost in the woods. In the book, she is running through the woods and she sees a boy and she hides because she's scared. And then he's sitting there, he drinks from the spring and then he covers it back up. And then he sees her. And he's like, well, you can come out now, I've seen you. And then they have their whole interaction. Now, to be fair, I did not want to see him twiddling a twig between his toes, which is what he was doing before he drank from the spring. Glad they changed that because I don't want to see those feet. But they instead had Winnie be really scared because she was lost. Not a big deal, that one's fine. She is disoriented, she is terrified, and she sees a random stranger in the wood and she just stares. She doesn't hide, she doesn't move, she just stares at him. And that is the stupidest thing she could have done. Like, if you are terrified already and you see a stranger in a place they're not supposed to be because it's your place and nobody should be there other than you, you're hiding. You would hide. But she doesn't do that. It's just annoying. And the spring is different than I imagined it. It's a lot harder to cover with rocks and to hide it as like a little miniature pond. I imagine the spring almost like a little water fountain, kind of a spout. But that they can cover the spout up with rocks, and then when you remove the rock, it kind of spouts up again. That was just how I thought of it. But Jesse doesn't cover the spring back up with rocks. They don't hide the spring at all. So many people could have come to town or gone through the woods, found the spring and drank from it. There would be so many other families like the Tucks because they didn't cover it up. Maybe this was just like overshadowed in, like, they forgot about it while filming, or it was blocked but then they didn't put it in or for some reason, I don't know. But either way, this creates a huge plot hole because they are not attempting to hide the spring at all. And if the spring isn't hidden, many other people would have found it. And then on top of that, as Winnie runs away, Jesse and specifically Miles are like chasing her and trying to grab her, and they're not gentle with her. The entire process of getting Winnie to come back to their home with them, obviously they had to kind of push her around a little bit, but she was so shocked that she was just kind of standing still. In this one, they are actively chasing her. They are actively grabbing her and pushing her and making sure she can't get away. They're not gentle with her, and so it's scaring her a lot more, which doesn't fit with May saying in the book later, oh, we didn't mean to scare you. Look at us. We're scaring children now. Obviously you're scaring children if you're running around and chasing them in the forest, trying to kidnap them. And then also, whenever they took her back to the cottage, they basically immediately told her what was going on and said, hey, we're immortal. And the rest of the story is about Winnie coming to terms with, are they crazy? Are they telling me the truth? Or they actually can't get hurt and can't die? Do I want to join them and be immortal, or do I want to live? And it's her contemplation of this throughout the rest of the story. Instead of doing that, they waited to tell Winnie until they were basically almost caught. So Winnie had no idea what was going on. She was just frolicking around with Jesse. And Jesse was giving hints here and there about, like, you know, he doesn't really care about what happens to him because nothing's going to happen to him because he can't die and he can't get hurt. Waiting to tell Winnie changes the entire story, because I think by the time they told her, they had about 30 minutes left of the hour-and-a-half movie. So majority of the movie had passed. So her consideration of this didn't last the entire story. And that's the entire point of the book. If you had the chance to live forever, would you take it? She only has 30 minutes to consider this instead of an hour. And I understand you're not in her head and you can't hear her thoughts and her debates going back and forth between whether or not she believes them, but they could have done a better job at showing it. And at least have her have conversations with, like, if you still want to focus on the romance aspect of it, have her have these conversations with Jesse. Or Toad. I don't know. But that was really bad. I didn't like that. And then there's the issue of the constable. The constable, I think he's in about 2 or 3 scenes here. And then they have a bunch of other members of the police force. They have a whole constable station where they're doing interrogations, and the dad goes to, like, say, hey, I think it's this man in the yellow suit and whatever. And the man in the yellow suit shows up and is like, in fact, no, it is not me. However, I can help you find it because I'm good at tracking. I think they added the entire police force to kind of raise the stakes and make tensions a little bit higher so that you're a little more on edge. The point in the book is it's a small town. That's why they only have the constable. That's why they only have one gallows. They only have a very bad, like, jail cell. And they were going to transport May and the higher up criminals to a different town so that the higher force can take care of them. Here they have that higher force. They don't need, like, they have a good jailhouse, they have a good gallows, they have whatever they need. Did they even show the gallows in the movie? No. I think they were just in jail. I think they were trying to add tensions, but it kind of defeated the purpose of it's a small town. And the constable even said, like, man, I should have brought a deputy for this. Which showed his stupidity because, yeah, it's a kidnapping case. This is, like, the biggest case you've had in a while and you don't bring backup. But now, he doesn't only bring back, like, 1 or 2 extra people in backup. He brings the entire police force. They're all going after them. And then, I'm just going to go in sequential order for this little bit of all the things that are wrong about this ending. An entire police force shows up. Before the entire police force shows up, the man in the yellow suit found them on his own. He didn't go and steal their horse and listen to the story to confirm. He instead was just tracking them the whole time. And then he found them, and he held a gun to Winnie's head, making him a lot more menacing than he was, and giving May an actual reason to kill him. He was going to kill somebody else. And as he was dead, he should have had the gun next to his hand, so May and Tuck should not have been arrested. For kidnapping, yes. For killing, absolutely not. Because it was very clearly self-defense. He was holding a gun. And all you have to do for that is Winnie saying, I ran away on purpose, which is what she did in the book. And they didn't do any of that. So there was no reason for them to be arrested. Why is Tuck arrested in the first place? I said I was going to go in sequential order. I didn't. They're packing to leave when the man in the yellow suit shows up. Why are they packing up? Not because somebody stole their horse, not because they actually had a reason to suspect that anyone was onto them, but because they were just a little scared. Because the man in the yellow suit had been tracking Jesse and Miles a while ago, and when they got to Tree Gap, they told their parents, and the parents was like, it's about time for us to leave anyway. And then the man in the yellow suit shows up with a gun and he threatens to kill Winnie if they don't tell him where the spring is. So then May kills him. But he would have had the gun in the hands. Whenever the horde of policemen showed up, you would have been able to tell it was self-defense, the killing. And then Winnie could easily dispute, I wanted to go with them. I love them. They're like my family. And then kidnapping charges dismissed because she went of her own free will. On top of that, the police got there, and after the police got there with their, 100 men on horseback, then Jesse and Miles get out of the picture, they would have had half of the group going to follow Jesse and Miles. And they didn't. Why were they able to go? Why did they let them leave? And then the entire plan at the end is different as well. They, instead of Miles loosening the screws on the window of the cell to pull out the bars so May can crawl through and Winnie can crawl back in and pretend to be May until the morning so they have time to get away. Instead of doing any of that, they decide we're going to go flaunt our immortality. So Winnie goes in. There are 2 prisoners that kidnapped a child and killed a person, and there's only one police officer on guard. So Winnie goes in and she says, help, they're after me, they're gonna kill me. And he goes outside with one weapon, stands at the door, and shoots both of them. And what happens? They get up. So what does the police officer do? He runs away. He doesn't go back in the building, because that would make too much sense. He doesn't try and shoot them again, because that would make too much sense. Instead, he's a scaredy cat. Why is he a police officer if he cannot handle this? Why is he the only one there? So as he runs away, Winnie just goes inside and lets Tuck and May out? This plan is just so stupid. It's a horrible, horrible plan, and I don't know why it worked. I will say, though, I did like the line at the end, when Jesse is leaving. He says, I'll love you till the day I die. It took me a minute to get it, but he's not gonna die. So he's gonna love her forever. That's a really good line, actually. I did like that. And then, of course, we go back to the beginning, which is actually the end, where Jesse comes back and he goes to what was Winnie's house. He goes onto their private property to look at a single grave. It would be weird, if I lived in a house, in the middle of the woods, where nobody is around, and some random dude came on my property to look at the one grave I have in the backyard. That's weird. What was supposed to happen is May and Tuck come into town. They enjoy town. They realize that the wood is gone and nobody has discovered the spring. And then Tuck goes to the local community cemetery, finds a family row, and Winnie is a part of that family. The woods are still there in the movie. It is Jesse that comes back, and he goes onto private property to find Winnie's grave. And on that grave, you realize they changed the time period as well. Instead of it being in the 18-somethings, instead of it being in 1880, and Winnie being born in 1870, and dying in 1948, Winnie lives to be 100 years old, born in 1899 and died in 1999. So Jesse showed up 3 years late because he showed up in 2002 when the movie was released, which is why he was riding a motorcycle and wearing a leather jacket. I don't want to do the math to figure out how old Winnie actually was whenever she died in the book, but she wasn't 100. Overall, I did not dislike the movie. Personally, I have to, when I go in to watch an adaptation of a book, a lot of times, if I realize it's going to be different, I have to separate the original source material from the movie that I'm watching, because it's a good movie by itself. But if you look at it compared to the book, there are so many differences that I can't even enjoy it. So I remember thoroughly enjoying this the first time I watched it. Now that I read the book and I'm looking specifically at all the differences, I don't like it as much. But I still think that a lot of the changes mess with the integrity of the story because it's not the original author's intention. And I don't know Natalie Babbitt, like how old she was or anything like that, but I feel like Natalie Babbitt didn't have much say over the film adaptation of this book, um, because they messed with it so much that I think her original intentions were not lived up to. I'm a huge believer of if the author writes it, it should be. Every word is chosen intentionally by the author. If the author wanted it in there or did not want it in there, they would have done it themselves. So when you are making the movie based off of that, you need to follow what the author wants. If you can speak to the author and get them to say these changes are okay, that's a different story. That doesn't mean that I have to like it. As someone who enjoys the book, I want it to be the exact same. But you get a little bit more grace as a filmmaker if you get approval from the author to change things. I do think some of these changes were made to make the movie longer because it is a short book. And it could have been done probably in like an hour 10 minutes, but instead they made it an hour and a half. So some of the changes were, I think, made to add length, to add drama, to make people a little bit more interested. Personally, I would have made it more lighthearted than darker. They kind of tried to make it a lot darker. This story is very young, so I would much prefer to have it be a lot more lighthearted. If I were to make this movie, I would have made it a whole lot differently. I was not alive in 1914, but I'm pretty sure all of the kissing that they did would have been scandalous. I think being alone with a guy during that time period, especially at 15 years old, was like borderline illegal. So all of that, like frolicking and kissing and all of that stuff, I think it was one, unnecessary because it didn't take place in the book at all, and two, not accurate to the time period either. I did like that they fleshed out the characters a little bit more, specifically Miles, and Jessie, and the Tucks were a lot more fleshed out, and her parents were more fleshed out. They were a little bit less flat than the grandmother was in the book. But I don't agree with a lot of the personality choices that they thought that the characters had. In my opinion, the characters are a lot different. So thank you so much for watching. I did enjoy this. I wanted to do it a little bit differently, but unfortunately, because I don't have a camera and because Disney Plus does not allow you to screen record, I can't really find good clips of the stuff to put in. I wanted to watch it and say my thoughts as I watched the movie, like a lot of commentary channels I see, but unfortunately I just don't know how to do that, and it didn't work out very well. There were a lot of issues that went on with that video, so hopefully soon I will be watching the musical. Hopefully that one I can screen record. I have been talking for way too long. I don't know if you can tell in my voice, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say goodbye. Bye!